Have you ever wondered why the urge to message him surges strongest at 2 a.m. when your mind replays every unsent word and every unanswered text? That pull is not love. It is a signal from the deeper psyche, a call to confront what Carl Jung named the shadow, the unacknowledged parts of yourself that you project onto him. Most women believe the ache is about him, but the truth is simpler and more empowering. The ache is about you. Today, you stand at the threshold of an alchemical process, Jung called individuation, where silence becomes the crucible that transmutes pain into self-possession. Abstinence from contact is not punishment. It is the first deliberate act of reclaiming your inner authority. Consider the archetype of the damsel a pattern etched into the collective unconscious. She waits for rescue, convinced that her worth arrives in the form of his reply. You have lived this archetype without choosing it, because culture scripts it from childhood. The princess, the sidekick, the girl who earns love by being needed. Jung observed that archetypes are not destiny, they are starting points. When you refrain from messaging him, you interrupt the script. The silence forces the damsel to face her own reflection. Have you noticed how quickly anxiety rises when you lock the phone? That discomfort is the shadow stirring. It carries every moment you diminished yourself to keep his attention, every sorry for feelings that were valid, every joke you laughed at that hurt you. The shadow does not want to be seen, yet seeing it is the only path to integration. You might tell yourself that one message will ease the tension, but Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, reminds us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. The event, his silence, his mixed signals, his disappearance, is outside your control. The mind, however, is yours. When you choose not to message, you practice what the Stoics called prohairesis, the faculty of choice. Each withheld text is a vote for your future self, the woman who no longer negotiates her value in real time. Have you ever watched a notification light up and felt your stomach drop, only to realize hours later that nothing catastrophic happened? That is the first taste of emotional sovereignty. Jung taught that the psyche seeks wholeness, and wholeness requires confrontation. The man you chase often embodies your animus, the inner masculine that carries logic, assertion, and boundary setting. If your animus is underdeveloped, you outsource him. You text to feel decisive, to feel protected, to feel chosen. Abstinence starves this projection. In the vacuum, the animus begins to speak with your own voice. You start asking questions you once reserved for him. What do I actually want? What will I no longer tolerate? These are not rhetorical, they are the animus integrating. You feel the shift physically, shoulders drop, breath deepens, because energy once scattered in pursuit returns home. Now, reflect on the last time you broke no contact. Recall the relief of sending the message, followed by the tighter knot in your chest, when he responded minimally or not at all. That cycle is a trauma bond, a term from modern attachment theory. It mimics addiction, the dopamine hit of hope, the crash of rejection. Your nervous system learns to associate love with uncertainty. Abstinence rewires the circuit. Neuroplasticity favors repetition. Every day without contact strengthens the pathway towards self-regulation. You are not getting over him. You are getting under your own skin, discovering the stable ground beneath the chaos. Have you ever feared that silence equals erasure? That if you stop reaching, you cease to exist in his mind, and therefore in your own? This fear belongs to the persona, the social mask Jung warned against over-identifying with. The persona thrives on external mirrors. Abstinence removes the mirror. At first, the reflection is distorted. You see only the parts he rejected. Stay with it. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." Time spent curating his perception is time stolen from knowing yourself. In the quiet, memories surface unfiltered. Childhood moments when you learned to perform for love, adolescent heartbreaks that taught you to shrink. These are not distractions, they are the raw material of individuation. You do not need to analyze every memory tonight. Simply notice what arises when you refuse to distract yourself with his inbox. The psyche is economical. It will deliver exactly what requires attention. Jung's patients in active imagination dialogues often met their shadow as a figure of the same sex. Here, perhaps a younger version of you, clutching a phone. Speak to her internally. I see you. You are safe now. This is not visualization for its own sake. It is shadow work, the prerequisite for authentic relating. When the shadow feels witnessed, it stops sabotaging from the dark. By now, the initial urge to message has likely crested and receded, leaving a clearer inner space. That space is fertile. Marcus Aurelius advised, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Translate this to your context. Waste no more time arguing what a worthy woman receives. Be her. Abstinence is the practice arena. Tomorrow the urge will return, weaker or disguised. Meet it with the same commitment. Each refusal etches a new neural groove until the day arrives when his name on your screen elicits curiosity rather than emergency. You are not waiting for him to validate your silence. You are validating it yourself. This is the alchemy Jung promised. Leaden attachment transmuted into golden selfhood. The process is incremental, but the shift is absolute. When you integrate the shadow, the animus, and the fear of erasure, you no longer orbit another's gravity. You become the center. The first week of abstinence often feels like walking through a house you once shared, noticing every empty corner where his presence used to live. You expect grief, and grief arrives, but beneath it runs a quieter current. Curiosity. Who are you when no one is watching your choices? Carl Jung described this stage as the confrontation with the persona's collapse. The persona is the curated self you presented to him, the quick replies, the carefully chosen emojis, the version that laughed off disrespect to keep the peace. When you stop messaging, the persona has no audience. At first, it panics. You may find yourself drafting texts in your head, rehearsing witty comebacks, or imagining his reaction to your silence. This is the persona fighting for survival. You are not the persona, you are the self observing it. Modern self-worth psychology confirms that over-identification with external roles erodes intrinsic value. Have you ever caught yourself thinking, if I don't respond within minutes, he'll assume I'm upset? That thought belongs to the persona, not to your core. Abstinence starves the role. The energy once spent performing returns to you as raw awareness. You begin to notice habits you adopted for his comfort, softening your opinions, apologizing for boundaries, mirroring his mood. These were not conscious betrayals. They were survival strategies rooted in the collective unconscious's ancient script. Woman as adapter, man as center. Epictetus taught that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The imagined conversations you replay are the mind's attempt to regain control. You picture him confused, then concerned, then reaching out. Or you picture him indifferent, which stings more. Both are fiction. The Stoic practice is to stay with what is. The phone is silent, your fingers are still, your heart rate is elevated. Label the sensation without judgment, tight chest, racing thoughts, and it loses half its power. You are training the nervous system to tolerate uncertainty, the same skill required for any secure relationship later. Now, a new archetype emerges: the orphan. Jung identified the orphan as the part of the psyche that feels abandoned and seeks belonging at any cost. She learned early that love is conditional, that disappearance follows authenticity. When you refrain from contact, the orphan awakens. She whispers that silence equals rejection, that you must prove your worth by re-engaging. Have you felt the physical urge to check in, disguised as kindness? That is the orphan bargaining. She does not yet trust that you can belong to yourself. Integration requires dialogue, not exile. Internally address the orphan. I am here. You are not alone. This is not positive affirmation. It is psychic honesty. The orphan carries legitimate pain, moments when caregivers were emotionally unavailable, when peers excluded you, when past partners vanished. Abstinence surfaces these memories unbidden. You may recall a specific afternoon in childhood waiting for a parent who never arrived. The adult mind knows the context, but the orphan feels the original wound. Allow the feeling without collapsing into it. Tears may come. Let them. The body releases stored stress when the psyche feels safe enough to process. Seneca observed that we are more often frightened than hurt. The orphan's fear is louder than the present danger. In reality, his inbox is not a courtroom deciding your value. Yet the orphan believes it is. Abstinence teaches differentiation. His response, or lack thereof, is data about him, not a verdict on you. Each day without contact widens the gap between trigger and reaction. You learn that the orphan's scream does not require immediate action. This is emotional regulation in its purest form. Have you noticed how solitude feels different now? Early abstinence brings loneliness, the absence of him. As the persona quiets and the orphan is witnessed, loneliness shifts into solitude, the presence of you. Jung wrote that the psyche is inherently relational. It dialogues with itself. In solitude, you become both speaker and listener. Questions arise organically. What do I enjoy without an audience? What angers me that I once swallowed? These are not self-help prompts, they are the self revealing its contours. The animus, briefly introduced earlier, deepens here. Previously outsourced to him as rescuer or validator, he now knocks from within. You feel impulses that surprise you, setting a firm boundary with a friend, declining an invitation that drains you, speaking a truth without cushioning. These are animus qualities: discernment, courage, protection. They feel foreign because you practiced them externally. Abstinence repatriates them. You are not becoming masculine, you are becoming whole. A common trap at this stage is intellectualizing the pain. You may research attachment styles, label him avoidant, diagnose the dynamic. Knowledge is useful, but only if it serves integration. Jung warned against using psychology as a defense against feeling. If analysis keeps you circling his flaws, it is avoidance. Return to the body. Where do you feel the orphan's fear? Place a hand there. Breathe. The gesture signals safety to the nervous system. You are not fixing the past. You are updating it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Reject your sense of injury and the injury itself disappears." Applied here, reject the story that his silence injures your worth, and the injury loses its charge. This is not denial, it is reframe. The facts remain, he may not reply, but the meaning shifts. Silence becomes information, not indictment. You gather data like a scientist. What patterns emerge when you stop initiating? The answers build self-trust. By the end of this phase, the urge to message is no longer a tidal wave. It is a manageable swell. You ride it without drowning. The orphan still speaks, but her voice is softer, less desperate. You have proven that you can survive her terror. This is the foundation of secure attachment. To self first, then to others. The man who once occupied center stage is shrinking to human size. You see his limitations without contempt, his choices without self-blame. This is compassion born of boundaries. The alchemy continues. What was lead, attachment, fear, performance, is becoming gold. Clarity, resilience, choice. You are not waiting for permission to feel worthy. You are granting it, one silent day at a time. The second week of abstinence ushers in a subtler adversary, the illusion of progress. You wake up lighter, scroll past his name without flinching, and congratulate yourself on healing. Then a song plays or a mutual friend mentions him and the ground tilts. The psyche, Jung observed, does not progress linearly, it spirals. What feels like backsliding is actually the emergence of the next layer, the anima, animus inversion. You integrated the animus as protector and decider, but now the anima, the inner feminine, demands attention. She is not the soft, receptive stereotype culture sells. She is the relational intelligence that senses undercurrents, reads rooms, and binds people through empathy. When underdeveloped, she leaks outward, convincing you that connection equals caretaking his emotional weather. Have you caught yourself drafting mental caretaking scripts? If I send a neutral check-in, I'll ease his stress. That is the anima overfunctioning. She believes love is labor. Abstinence withholds the labor. The immediate result is guilt. Modern psychology calls this empathic distress. Your nervous system, wired for connection, registers his potential discomfort as your responsibility. But Epictetus cuts through. Another person's misfortune is not your own. His mood is not your jurisdiction. The guilt is data, not directive. Jung noted that the anima often appears in projection as the perfect woman the man seeks. If he idealized you early, called you different, soul-deep, rare, then ghosted, the projection collapsed. You internalize the collapse as personal failure. Abstinence dismantles the internalization. You begin to see the pattern. Idealization devaluation is his mechanism, not your flaw. The anima, freed from carrying his fantasy, turns inward. She asks, what do I need to feel relationally alive without managing someone else's inner world? This question surfaces practical shifts. You stop curating your social media for his possible view. You speak in group chats without calculating his reaction. These are not dramatic, they are diagnostic. Each unfiltered choice reveals where the anima was contorted. Seneca advised, we suffer more from imagination than reality. The imagined version of his judgment is the last chain. Abstinence files it down, day by day. A new challenge arises, the void. With the persona quiet, the orphan soothed, and the animus strengthening, space opens. Most people rush to fill it, new dates, rebound texts, endless plans. You resist. Jung called this the nigredo, the blackening phase of alchemy where everything useful seems lost. In the void, the collective unconscious speaks loudest. Dreams intensify. You may dream of locked doors, empty trains, or a version of him who apologizes profusely. Record the dreams without interpreting immediately. The psyche is digesting. Modern trauma research aligns here. Hypervigilance taught you to scan for threat. His inconsistent responses trained your amygdala to treat silence as danger. Abstinence is exposure therapy without the therapist. You sit with the alarm until it downgrades. Heart rate spikes, then settles. Spike, settle. The interval between spike and settle lengthens. You are rewiring. Have you noticed that a full day now passes without checking his online status? That is the void doing its work, clearing neural debris. The anima's integration manifests as relational recalibration. You notice which friendships drained you because you played the same caretaker. You initiate contact on your terms, not as reflex. You tolerate someone's bad mood without fixing it. These are not self-improvement goals, they are side effects of the anima reclaiming her energy. She is no longer a satellite. She is the relational center of your own life. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." Abstinence improves thought quality by removing the distortion of his feedback loop. You think clearly because no one is grading the thoughts in real time. Clarity reveals old bargains. If I stay sweet, he stays. If I intellectualize his flaws, I keep access. These were anima strategies to secure attachment. Now you see the cost, your authenticity. The void is the price of admission to a self you postponed. Have you felt moments of genuine laughter without checking if he'd approve? That is the anima delighting in her own company. She does not need an audience to validate joy. The feeling is fleeting at first, then it lingers. You cook a meal because you're hungry, not to post it. You choose a movie because it interests you, not because it signals depth. These micro-choices compound. The psyche registers safety in self-directed living. A subtle temptation emerges, using the void to punish him. You imagine him suffering in your silence, checking his phone, wondering. This is the shadow anima, vengeful, scorekeeping. Acknowledge her without acting. She carries righteous anger from every time you swallow disrespect. Anger is information, retaliation is distraction. Jung's rule, feel the archetype, do not become it. Internally, thank the vengeful anima. I see why you want justice. We will get it by thriving, not by texting. By the close of this phase, the void is less black and more luminous. You sense possibility where panic once lived. The anima, no longer projected or overfunctioning, becomes creative. You write for yourself, dance alone, speak truths in safe spaces. Creativity is the anima's native language. Abstinence gave her a studio. The man is now a footnote, not the plot. You do not hate him, you simply do not organize your day around him. This is not indifference, it is accurate proportion. The psyche has resized him to human scale. You carry the integrated anima forward, relational depth without self-erasure, empathy without enmeshment. The spiral tightens. What was void becomes ground. You stand on it. The third week of abstinence unveils the archetype Jung called the wise old woman, though she arrives not as a gray-haired sage, but as a calm, unhurried knowing that settles in your chest. You no longer flinch at the sight of couples holding hands. You observe them with the detachment of a researcher. The psyche has shifted from survival to synthesis. The shadow has been met, the animus integrated, the anima reclaimed. What remains is the transpersonal layer, the connection to something larger than your personal drama. Abstinence has cleared the static so the signal can come through. Have you noticed thoughts arising without your summons? A sudden clarity about a career move, a boundary you now enforce without apology, a memory of your grandmother's quiet strength? These are not random. They are the collective unconscious delivering guidance. Jung believed the self, the organizing center of the psyche, speaks most clearly when the ego stops shouting. Your ego once shouted through texts, "Notice me, choose me, fix me." Silence muted it. The self does not bargain. It states. Stoic philosophy meets Jung here. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." Abstinence proves the claim. You are not happier because he returned. He hasn't. You are happier because the metric changed. External validation was a noisy stock market, volatile, exhausting. Internal validation is a steady dividend. You compound it daily by choosing not to message. Modern self-worth psychology labels this stage post-traumatic growth. The trauma was not always dramatic, abandonment, gaslighting, love bombing, but the nervous system registered it as threat. Abstinence is the controlled burn that clears dead wood. New growth appears. You decline a social obligation without guilt. You spend an evening reading without performing productivity. You feel anger and let it pass without texting it to him. Each act is a neuron firing in the direction of sovereignty. The wise old woman archetype carries a specific task: discernment. She separates wheat from chaff. You revisit past conversations not to relive pain, but to extract data. What did his actions teach you about your tolerances? Where did you override your intuition? Discernment is not judgment, it is calibration. You are tuning the instrument of your boundaries. Have you found yourself mentally rewriting old texts with the truth you withheld? That is the wise old woman editing for accuracy. She does not dwell, she distills. A new phenomenon emerges: synchronicity. Jung coined the term for meaningful coincidences that feel orchestrated. You open a book to a passage about self-respect. A podcast mentions the exact dynamic you just left. A stranger compliments your energy. These are not woo-woo. They are the psyche confirming direction. The collective unconscious is a web. Abstinence aligns you with supportive threads. You are no longer pulling against the current of your own becoming. Seneca's letters emphasize living in accordance with nature. Applied here, your nature is not to chase, to shrink, to audition. Your nature is to expand, to protect, to choose. Abstinence aligns action with essence. The alignment feels physical, sleep deepens. Appetite stabilizes, focus sharpens. The body votes yes when the psyche stops lying to it. Have you caught yourself smiling at nothing? Not the performative grin for a selfie, but the private curve of lips when a realization lands. That is the self delighting in its own coherence. You are no longer split, wanting him and resenting the want, craving connection and fearing engulfment. The split has fused. Fusion does not mean perfection, it means wholeness. You carry contradictions without being torn by them. The wise old woman also brings grief, not for him, but for the years spent orbiting lesser suns. This grief is clean. It does not loop, it processes. You may cry in the shower, then step out lighter. The tears are not regression, they are completion. Epictetus said, "There is only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will." You have ceased. The relief is cellular. A practical shift accompanies the archetype. You stop explaining yourself to ghosts. You no longer mentally justify your silence to him, to friends who don't understand. to the version of you that once begged. The wise old woman knows explanation is for equals. Silence is not absence. It is presence elsewhere. You are present to your own life. Dreams now carry authority. You may dream of standing on a cliff, wind steady, no urge to jump or call for rescue. Or you dream of a library where every book is written in your handwriting. These are self-dreams, blueprints, not riddles. Upon waking, you feel oriented, not disoriented. The psyche is no longer negotiating, it is navigating. By now, his name evokes a neutral curiosity, like a character from a book you finished. You do not wish him harm, you wish him irrelevance. This is not coldness, it is accurate temperature. The wise old woman does not burn energy on closed chapters, she archives them. You begin to sense the end point of abstinence, not as a return to him, but as a graduation from the need for it. The practice has served its purpose. You have mined the dynamic for every lesson. The man was catalyst, not destination. The destination was always you. The alchemy nears completion. Lead has become gold, but gold is not static. It circulates. You will carry this refined self into every future interaction. The next man who enters your orbit will meet a woman who does not outsource her center. That is the ultimate empowerment. Not to punish the past, but to outgrow it so thoroughly that it cannot repeat. The fourth week of abstinence dissolves the final illusion that the journey was about him at all. You wake without checking the phone first, and the absence of that reflex registers as ordinary, not heroic. Jung called this the transcendent function, the moment when opposing forces within the psyche, yearning versus restraint, attachment versus autonomy, stop wrestling and synthesize into a new attitude. You are no longer abstaining to prove a point or to win a future apology. You are abstaining because the alternative no longer computes. The man has become a historical footnote, useful only as the grit that formed the pearl. Have you noticed how decisions now carry a different weight? Choosing a workout, a meal, a weekend plan, no background calculation of how it might look to him. That background process was the ego's tax on every action. Abstinence zeroed the tax. Modern psychology names this decisional autonomy, but the Stoics knew it 2 millennia earlier. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Mastery is not grand. It is the quiet click of choosing coffee because you want coffee, not because it signals independence. The archetype surfacing now is the sovereign, not the ruler of others, but the ruler of self. Jung saw sovereignty as the endpoint of individuation, the ego aligned with the self, no longer hijacked by complexes. The sovereign does not negotiate with ghosts. She does not reopen closed doors to check if the draft still stings. You feel her in the way you walk, spine neutral, gaze forward. You feel her in conversation. Words land without the aftertaste of, "Did I say too much?" The sovereign's currency is attention, and she spends it deliberately. A subtle test arrives, opportunity. A new man smiles in line at the bookstore. A friend suggests fixing you up. Your system registers interest without emergency. There is no scramble to prove worth, no reflex to dim your light so he feels safe. This is the sovereign's first public appearance. She does not audition, she assesses. Have you caught yourself thinking, "I wonder what he's like," instead of "I wonder if he'll like me"? That shift is seismic. The internal committee that once debated your lovability has been dissolved by lack of quorum. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." Abstinence cured the craving. You are not poor in options, you are rich in criteria. The sovereign's criteria are non-negotiable: reciprocity, respect, alignment. These are not demands shouted across a negotiation table. They are quiet. Filters applied before the first coffee. You do not announce them, you embody them. The embodiment is the difference between strategy and state. Dreams shift again. You may dream of a throne room where you sit alone, not lonely. Or you dream of handing a key to a younger version of yourself, saying, "This opens every door you need." These are coronation dreams. The psyche crowns what it has integrated. Upon waking, you do not rush to interpret. You simply feel taller. Modern attachment theory offers a framework. You have moved from preoccupied to secure. The preoccupied style scanned for threat in every silence. The secure style assumes safety until proven otherwise. Abstinence was the bridge. You crossed it by tolerating the discomfort of not knowing, then discovering that not knowing did not kill you. The discovery is now bone deep. Have you noticed how anger has transmuted? Early abstinence carried rage, at him, at yourself, at the unfairness. The sovereign feels anger as information, not identity. When a colleague dismisses your idea, you register the heat, name the boundary, and move on. No late-night text to a friend dissecting the injustice. The heat serves propulsion, not paralysis. This is emotional economy. The collective unconscious now delivers confirmation through lived experience. You mentor a younger woman without realizing it, offering the advice you once needed. A stranger asks for directions and thanks you for your calm. These are not ego boosts. They are feedback loops from a regulated system. The sovereign radiates regulation. People feel it before they name it. Marcus Aurelius advised, when you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. Abstinence returned the privilege. You breathe without the weight of unread messages. You think without the static of his opinion. You enjoy without the asterisk of performance. Love remains possible, but it is no longer a survival need. A final temptation surfaces. Nostalgia. A memory of the good moments, laughter, inside jokes, the way he looked at you that one night. Nostalgia is the ego's last attempt to reopen the case. The sovereign reviews the evidence without bias. The good moments existed, so did the erosion. Both are true. She closes the file. Nostalgia loses its voltage when it no longer threatens the present. You now understand abstinence as a misnomer. You never abstained from him. You invested in you. The return compounds daily. You speak in meetings with authority that once felt borrowed. You end conversations that drain without guilt. You choose solitude not as default, but as preference. These are not victories over him. They are victories of coherence. The man, wherever he is, occupies less than 1% of your mental bandwidth. When his name surfaces, it is with the mild interest you give a former coworker. You do not wish him pain, you wish him growth, at a safe distance. The sovereign does not fence old battlegrounds. She builds new cities. Emotional freedom is not the absence of feeling, it is the presence of choice. You feel deeply, joy, irritation, desire, without outsourcing the regulation. Self-sovereignty is not isolation, it is filtration. You relate from overflow, not deficit. Inner peace is not numbness, it is the quiet hum of a system no longer at war with itself. You chose silence, and silence gave you a voice that cannot be ignored, not by others, not by you.